Strobe, thanks very much for letting me have this conversation with you. You've written that the European Union is, quote, the greatest experiment in regional cooperation the world has ever known. But it's had a bumpy ride the last few years, and it's really doubtful whether it can hang together. Should it hang together? Can it hang together?
Should definitely hang together. We all should hope that it does, because it's not only important to the future of Europe. If it can get back on track, it will, I think, represent to other parts of the world effective regional governance and integration. In fact, one can even imagine down the road quite a ways that some of the federalist principles that have gone into the European Union could work even on a global basis. Can it hang together? Yeah, I think so. But boy, it's been a close-run thing that seems to be moving in the right direction now, but that, of course, assumes that we don't have another economic collapse.
You've written a really interesting essay tracing the history of this idea back to Jean Monnet and others who thought that the Europe, having been the bloodiest place of war in the world for so many centuries, that the only way out was economic integration. Tell me a little bit more about what Jean Monnet saw that perhaps others didn't see after the ashes of World War II.
Well, one thing is that he was not a trained economist. He was a businessman. You could even say a business boy, since he went into the family business, which was brandy and cognac, while he was in his teens. Never even went to college, much less an advanced degree. And I think that gave him a sense of two things. One, how important a successful economy was to a successful political order. And also, it gave him a sense of the importance of having a method for building political institutions in order to support strong economics, and also what it would take to have an effective and successful economy in an atmosphere that was conducive to trade and also to different nationalities working with each other peacefully.
Do you think the primary motive for all the centuries of warfare in Europe was economic in nature, and that economics can sort of reduce the potential for conflict in the future?
Well, in some ways, Steve, and you've written on this subject yourself, it's artificial to talk about economics as though it's different from politics. The word economy has the same root as the word ecology. It means having to do with the environment in which we live. And we have some ways of managing our environment and our lives that classify as political, and others that classify as economic. But the very fact that we talk about political economy
right.
Shows that there's really there's a mixture of the two. I think at the core of Monnet's driving passion, which was the integration of Europe, is he wanted to see an environment, both political and economic, that rewarded those nation states, those states based on the idea that if you speak French, you live in a country called France, and if you speak Dutch, you live in a country called Holland, to look for ways of meshing their economy together with their neighbors and have a web reach out over all of Europe that would be more powerful than the national passions and hatreds that had brought the continent to war so often.
How much have you worried throughout this period, and do you worry still, though, that the tough austerity measures that are being imposed on Italy, Spain, Greece, and even to some degree in France, where a socialist president is moving to the right and insisting on fiscal discipline if not disciplined, in other parts of his life. The how much do you worry about a resurgence, though, of extremism and anti-cooperation, either from the left or the right? In some ways, we've seen less of it than some people fear. But looking ahead, are you concerned about that?
Looking not just ahead, but looking at the situation right now, and you alluded to this, nationalistic, xenophobic, anti-immigration, anti-European policies are getting much more popular support. And that could be what brings this whole thing to a crashing halt. Now, European friends think that they see a generational split here, that there are still a lot of, say, under 40 Europeans who identify themselves as Europeans, which goes back to the original Monnet dream. But there's a general principle that we were taught, or our forefathers were taught, in the 1930s in particular, and that is a bad economy very often engenders bad politics. And bad politics, which is to say ugly forces that come out in politics, then are responsible for bad policies, including, of course, the worst kind of racism, which is nationalism carried to an extreme, and war. We've seen that. If I can just recall one of the most important set of statements I ever heard from a world leader when I was in government myself. It was from Helmut Kohl, who was the Chancellor of Germany, of course. And he explained to me in a way that came as a revelation why he believed so much in the expansion of the European Union itself, the expansion of the European Union, which would only happen with the expansion of NATO. He very candidly acknowledged that Germany had a pretty lousy first half of the 20th century, to put it mildly. And that, by the way, Germany had its own German problem, which he attributed in no small measure to the fact that Germany was always the easternmost part of the West. It was up against the West, which tended to fan a degree of xenophobia, paranoia, and militarism. So his vision for his own country was that it needed to be embedded in a West, a political West, that stretched beyond obviously into Poland, and maybe someday even into parts of the Soviet Union, which of course has now come to pass. So that was an enlightened national basis for an internationalist vision.
It was also Monnet's vision that Germany was at the center of the problems that Europe had to solve, and that it needed to be integrated into a European unity.
And I think a final point on that would be that his only really major public role was as the architect and the leader of the European Coal and Steel Community, which was originally based on a bilateral understanding between France and Germany, the historic enemies. And once they were together in this economic arrangement, other countries joined, and that became the basis of the European Union.